The first time I realized my family had erased me, it was written in black ink on a wedding name tag. I had arrived at the Harborview Grand Hotel in Charleston just after 4 o'clock, early enough to avoid being rushed, late enough that the lobby was already glowing with soft gold light and the smell of white roses. My granddaughter Madison was getting married that evening, and for weeks I had told myself this would be a beautiful day. I was 72 years old enough to know that families bend and bruise in quiet ways, but foolish enough, maybe, to believe a wedding could still bring everyone back to kindness. I wore a pale blue dress, the one my late husband Henry always said made my eyes look brighter, and I pinned his small pearl brooch near my collar because I wanted a piece of him with me. In my purse was a cream envelope with Madison's name written in my best handwriting. Inside was a check I had not told anyone about, not even my son Mark, because I wanted my granddaughter to begin married life with a little breathing room. Not control, not credit, just breathing room. The young woman at the check-in table smiled politely and asked for my name. Eleanor Whitmore, I said, grandmother of the bride. She searched the neat rows of place cards, her fingers moving from Wexler to Whitman to Whitmore, then stopped. Her smile changed first. It did not disappear all at once. It simply weakened, like a candle losing air. She looked down at the card, then up at me, then back down again. I knew before she handed it over that something was wrong. The card was ivory, edged in gold, tied with a tiny ribbon that matched the bridesmaids' dresses. It should have said Eleanor Whitmore. It should have said grandmother of the bride. Instead, in elegant black calligraphy, it read, the forgotten old woman. For a moment, the hotel lobby seemed to go quiet around me. Not truly quiet, of course. The string quartet was still warming up somewhere beyond the ballroom doors. Guests were still laughing near the bar. A bellhop was still rolling luggage across the marble floor. But inside me, everything stopped. The young woman whispered that she was so sorry, that there must have been a mistake, that she could call the planner. I looked past her shoulder and saw my daughter-in-law, Vanessa, standing near a tower of champagne glasses in a satin dress the color of expensive cream. She was watching me, not surprised, not embarrassed, watching. When our eyes met, she gave me the smallest smile, the kind people use when they have hidden the knife so well they believe no one can prove it was theirs. I looked back down at the name tag. My hands did not shake. That almost surprised me. I had spent too many years smoothing tablecloths, forgiving late phone calls, pretending forgotten invitations were accidents. But this was not an accident. This had been printed, approved, placed in alphabetical order, and waiting for me. So I did the only thing that felt worthy of the woman Henry had loved. I took the pin, fastened that cruel little card to my dress, lifted my chin, and walked into my granddaughter's wedding as if the whole room had not just told me exactly where I stood. The ballroom looked too beautiful for cruelty, and maybe that was what made it hurt more. Every table was dressed in white linen, every chair tied with a pale ribbon, every centerpiece arranged with roses, baby's breath, and tall glass candles that made the room shimmer like something from a bridal magazine. Beyond the wide windows, the Charleston harbor caught the late afternoon light, all silver water and slow-moving boats, while inside, waiters moved silently with trays of sparkling cider and champagne. I had helped pay for this. $35,000, transferred in 3 careful payments after Vanessa called me in March with a trembling voice and said Madison deserved one perfect day. She had told me the venue costs had gone higher than expected, that Mark was stressed, that she hated to ask, but did not know who else loved Madison enough to help without making it complicated. I remembered sitting at my kitchen table with the checkbook open, Henry's photograph watching from the mantel, telling myself this was not for Vanessa. It was for my granddaughter. It was for family. Now I stood near the entrance with those 4 words pinned to my chest, watching the same. Family posed for photographs without me. The photographer called for parents of the bride, then siblings, then college friends, then the Whitmore side. I stepped half a pace forward when I heard that, more from habit than confidence. But Vanessa lifted one manicured hand and said, "Not yet, Eleanor. We are keeping this group small." Small. That was the word she used for a family that had somehow grown large enough to include her yoga instructor, her neighbor from 2 streets over, and a woman I recognized from the country club newsletter, but not large enough for the grandmother who had mailed birthday cards every year before the ink on Madison's thank you notes had dried. I moved back without a word. Mark stood beside Vanessa in a navy suit, his tie slightly crooked the way it always was when he dressed without thinking. When he saw me, his eyes dropped to the name tag. He read it. I watched him read it. For one breath, something like shame crossed his face. Then Vanessa touched his elbow, and it vanished. He looked away. That small turning of his head did more to me than the card itself. Vanessa could be sharp. Vanessa could be vain. Vanessa could turn an insult into a centerpiece and call it humor. But Mark was my child. I had rocked him through ear infections, driven him to Little League practice, stayed awake during storms because thunder frightened him until he was 12. And there he was, choosing silence because silence was easier than standing beside me. A waiter passed, and I took a glass of water just to give my hand something to hold. Across the room, the wedding slideshow began to play on a large screen near the dance floor. Madison as a baby. Madison at the beach. Madison on her first day of school. Madison in her cap and gown. I smiled despite myself, because I had taken some of those pictures. Then the next slide appeared, and the next, and the next. Mark was there. Vanessa was there. Henry appeared once, standing behind Madison at a 4th of July picnic, his face sunburned and happy. But I was not there. Not at Christmas. Not at birthdays. Not at the lake. Not even cropped badly from the edge. I had not been forgotten by accident. I had been removed with care. The slideshow ended with a picture of Madison and her fiancé under a shower of white flower petals, and the room filled with warm applause. I clapped too. That is the strange thing about heartbreak inside a family. Your hands can still move politely while your heart is standing in the corner, trying to understand what just happened. I had barely lowered my hands when Vanessa crossed the room toward me with 2 women beside her, both wearing soft pastel dresses and the bright, curious smiles of people who had heard a story before meeting the person inside it. Eleanor, Vanessa said, stretching my name like it was something fragile she had decided not to respect. I want you to meet Diane and Melissa. They helped with the bridal luncheon. Then her eyes dropped to my chest, and her smile widened by the smallest degree. Oh good, you found your name tag. Diane glanced at it, and gave a startled little laugh before catching herself. Melissa looked uncomfortable and turned her glass between both hands. Is that a joke? Diane asked, not cruelly, but not kindly either. Vanessa touched her necklace and gave a light, airy laugh. Oh, Eleanor has always had a wonderful sense of humor. She understands our family jokes. We are trying to keep everything fun tonight. Fun. I let the word settle between us. I had learned years ago that people who hurt you in public often depend on your politeness to finish the job for them. They make the insult, then ask you to smile so no one else feels awkward. I looked at Diane, then Melissa, then back at Vanessa. Apparently, I said, that is what they chose for me. The air changed. Not dramatically. No one gasped. No music stopped. But Diane's smile faded, and Melissa looked at Vanessa with a question she was too polite to ask. Vanessa's jaw tightened, only for a second. Eleanor, she said softly, this is Madison's wedding. Let us not make a sweet little misunderstanding bigger than it needs to be. A misunderstanding is when a florist brings ivory roses instead of white, I said. This took planning. Vanessa's eyes sharpened, but her voice stayed smooth. You see? She said to the women, forcing another laugh. Dry humor. Very old. School. I almost admired how quickly she worked. She could turn embarrassment into charm, insult into tradition, cruelty into etiquette. She had been doing it for years. Only I had called it keeping the peace because I wanted to believe my son had married a woman with difficult edges, not a woman who enjoyed filing people down. Mark approached then, carrying a folded program in one hand. Mom, he said under his breath, please. Not tonight. I looked at him carefully. His face was tired, but not surprised. That mattered. It meant he had known enough to be nervous and not enough to be brave. I asked him one quiet question. Did you see it before tonight? He swallowed. Vanessa answered for him. Eleanor, honestly, the printer made several mistakes. The printer, I repeated. Yes, Vanessa said. These events are complicated. You know how vendors can be. I looked across the room at the seating chart displayed in a gold frame near the gift table. Every name was written perfectly. Every title was graceful. Mother of the bride. Father of the bride. Maid of honor. Beloved friends. I looked back at my daughter-in-law. No, I said gently. I know how people can be. I turned away from the seating chart before my face could betray me. There are moments when pain does not arrive like a storm. It arrives like a small, ordinary object placed exactly where it should not be. A name tag, a missing chair, a son who looks down instead of stepping forward. The reception staff began guiding guests toward their tables, and I followed the flow of silk dresses, dark suits, perfume, and polite laughter into the center of the ballroom. I already knew I would not be seated near the head table. I had known it the moment Vanessa smiled at me from beside the champagne tower. Still, some foolish part of me hoped there might be one mercy left in the evening. There was not. My place card sat at table 19, near the kitchen doors, beside a distant cousin of Vanessa's, two retired neighbors I had never met, and a widower who spent most of the meal trying to remember whether he had parked on the second or third level of the garage. From where I sat, I could see Madison only when someone moved aside. She looked beautiful, truly beautiful. Her white gown caught the candlelight, and every time she laughed, I saw the little girl who once ran across my backyard in bare feet, holding a popsicle in each hand because she said one was for Grandpa Henry. I wanted to hold on to that memory, but the room kept pulling me back to the present. At the family table, Vanessa sat tall and shining, one hand resting lightly on Mark's sleeve as if he were something she owned and displayed. Mark saw me looking. For a second, our eyes met across the distance. I did not wave. I only waited. He could have stood up then. He could have walked over and said, "Mom, this is wrong." He could have asked a server to bring another chair to the family table. He could have done one small thing that would have told me I still belonged to him in some corner of his heart. Instead, he lifted his water glass, took a drink, and turned toward Vanessa. That was when the years began moving through me. Mark at 6, asleep on my lap after a school play. Mark at 17, pretending not to be scared before his first college interview. Mark at 30, standing in my kitchen after Henry lent him money for his first house, saying he would pay us back every penny. He never did, and I never asked. Mothers have a dangerous habit of calling debt love when it comes from their children. The salad arrived. I picked up my fork. I put it down again. A woman across from me leaned forward and squinted at my name tag. "Well," she said with an uncertain smile, "that is certainly unusual." I looked down at the card as though seeing it for the first time. "Yes," I said. "It is honest in a way they probably did not intend." She did not know what to say after that, so she reached for her bread roll. Near the front of the room, Vanessa laughed at something a guest had said, bright and polished and completely untroubled. Mark laughed too, a half-second late. I knew that laugh. It was the laugh of a man trying to survive the evening without choosing a side. But not choosing was still a choice. I folded my napkin neatly in my lap and sat a little straighter. If they wanted me forgotten, I would remember everything. By the time the main course was served, I had stopped trying to taste anything. The chicken breast with lemon butter could have been paper for all I knew. Around me, forks clicked softly against china, strangers discussed weather, real estate, and traffic on King Street, and every few minutes the kitchen door swung open behind my chair with a rush of heat and noise. It was almost funny, being placed so close to the service entrance. Every server in the room saw me before my own family did. I excused myself before dessert and walked toward the hallway outside the ballroom, needing one quiet minute where no one could glance at my chest and decide whether to pity me or laugh. The hallway was cooler, lined with framed paintings of sailboats and old Charleston streets. I stood near a tall window overlooking the harbor and touched Henry's pearl brooch with 2 fingers. For the first time that evening, I let myself miss him without restraint. Henry would have noticed the seating chart. Henry would have noticed Mark's silence. Henry would have taken one look at that name tag and quietly removed me from the room before anyone else had the chance to enjoy my humiliation. "Eleanor?" The voice came from behind me, familiar and low. I turned and saw Clara Bennett walking toward me in a dark green dress, her silver hair pinned neatly at the back of her neck. Clara had been my friend for nearly 40 years, though we had seen less of each other after Henry passed. She had once worked as a legal assistant for the attorney who handled our family documents, and she had the careful eyes of a woman who missed very little. She looked at my face first, then at the card pinned to my dress. Her expression changed in a way the check-in girls had not. Not embarrassment. Recognition. "Who did that?" she asked. I gave a small smile. "Apparently, the printer." Clara did not smile back. "Do not protect them from the truth, Eleanor. Not tonight." The words landed harder than I expected. I looked down the hallway toward the ballroom doors, where music and laughter spilled out in bright, careless waves. Clara stepped closer and lowered her voice. There is something I need to tell you. I should have said it earlier, but I was not certain how much you knew. My stomach tightened. How much I knew about what? About Vanessa calling Mr. Aldridge's office. Twice, Clara said. Maybe 3 times. She asked questions about the Whitmore family trust, about when Madison might receive support after the wedding, and whether family gifts could be redirected if you were considered unable to manage your own affairs. I stared at her. The hallway seemed to narrow. Unable to manage my own affairs. Clara nodded slowly. She dressed it up as concern, of course. Said you were getting forgetful. Said Mark was overwhelmed. Said Madison's future should not be held back by old paperwork. Old paperwork. I almost laughed. Henry's entire life had been built on careful paperwork. He trusted signatures more than promises, because promises could smile at you while they stole the chair from under your name. Clara reached into her small evening bag and touched a folded envelope, but did not remove it. Henry added a clause before he died, she said. Mr. Aldridge explained it to me when I witnessed one of the updates. If anyone in the family publicly humiliates you, pressures you, or tries to benefit from isolating you, the trust can suspend distributions connected to that person. I stood very still. From inside the ballroom, I heard applause begin again, probably for some cheerful speech I had not been invited to hear from the front of the room. Clara's eyes softened. He was protecting you, Eleanor, even after he knew he might not be here to do it himself. I looked back through the open doors and saw Vanessa standing near the head table, glowing beneath the chandeliers, certain the evening belonged to her. For the first time all night, the name tag on my chest felt less like a wound and more like evidence. I returned to the ballroom with Clara walking half a step behind me, not like a guard, but like a witness. That mattered. For most of my life, I had confused being quiet with being fair. I had believed that if I absorbed enough discomfort, the people I loved would eventually notice and soften. But families do not always soften when one person keeps making room. Sometimes they simply take the extra room and call it tradition. I sat back down at table 19, smoothed my napkin over my lap, and looked at the room with different eyes. The candles were still glowing. The flowers were still perfect. Vanessa was still moving from guest to guest with that practiced warmth of hers, accepting compliments as if she had built the evening from love instead of other people's checks. I took my phone from my small purse and held it low beneath the table. First, I photographed the name tag on my dress, clearly enough that the words could not be mistaken. Then I excused myself again, walked slowly past the gift table, and took a picture of the seating chart in its gold frame. There it was, table 19, my name printed neatly between strangers, while people who had known Madison for less than a year sat near the front under the label Close Family. I did not feel anger then. Not the hot kind. What I felt was colder and much more useful. I opened my messages and scrolled back to March, to Vanessa's long note about the wedding budget. I found her words exactly where I had left them. You are the only one who understands how much this means to Madison. We would be so grateful. I took screenshots of the messages, the transfer confirmations, the polite thank you she had sent without ever telling Madison where the money came from. Then I opened my email and found the receipt for the final payment I had wired to the venue. $35,000 is not a small favor. It is a roof repair. It is a year of property taxes. It is medical bills, groceries, and winter heat. It is the kind of money a woman my age does not part with lightly unless she believes love is on the other side of it. A burst of laughter came from behind me. I turned just enough to see Vanessa speaking with 2 younger women near the bar. I did not move closer, but her voice carried over the music because Vanessa had never learned how to whisper when she felt admired. Older people get sentimental when they are not the center of attention, she said lightly. Eleanor will be fine. She always makes these things dramatic in her own quiet way. One woman laughed. The other looked unsure. I pressed record on my phone and rested it face down beside my water glass. I did not need to trap Vanessa. I only needed to stop saving her from herself. Clara came to my table a few minutes later and placed a hand on the back of the empty chair beside me. Did you get what you needed? She asked softly. I looked toward the head table, where Mark was leaning close to Vanessa, nodding at something she said. Yes, I answered. More than I wanted. The music softened after dessert, and a man in a black suit stepped to the microphone near the dance floor. He tapped it twice, smiled at the small sound, and announced that it was time for family to share a few words for the bride and groom. Family. The word moved through me quietly. It had once meant Sunday dinners, porch lights left on, casseroles carried across town, phone calls answered even when you were tired. That evening, it seemed to mean whoever Vanessa had placed closest to the photographer. Mark spoke first. He held his note card with both hands, though I doubted he needed it. He talked about Madison as a baby, about teaching her to ride a bicycle, about how proud he was of the woman she had become. His voice cracked once, and the room gave a tender little sound. I watched Madison wipe her eyes with the corner of her napkin. I wanted to be glad for that moment, and part of me was. Mark loved his daughter. I had never doubted that. What I doubted, as I watched him thank guests from Atlanta, Boston, and Savannah before stepping away without saying my name, was whether love made a person brave if comfort had trained him too well. Then Vanessa took the microphone. She did not use note cards. Vanessa never needed paper when the performance mattered. She began by praising Madison's elegance, the groom's family, the bridesmaids, the planner, the florist, the photographer, even the hotel staff for making the evening flawless. Her voice was warm honey poured over glass. People smiled before she finished each sentence, already prepared to be charmed. I sat very still at table 19 with my phone in my lap and Henry's brooch cool beneath my fingertips. Vanessa lifted her glass and looked around the room as if she had personally chosen every face in it. Tonight is about the people who truly showed up for Madison, she said. The people who understood that family is not just about age, history, or obligation. It is about presence. It is about knowing when to step forward and when to step aside. A few guests nodded. Someone murmured, "Beautiful." Vanessa continued, and although her eyes did not land on me directly, I felt the shape of every word. Some people from the older generation struggle when the spotlight moves on. They feel forgotten, even when everyone is simply trying to celebrate the future. A polite ripple of laughter passed through the room, light and uneasy. Madison's smile faltered. Mark looked down at his empty dessert plate. Clara, standing near the side wall, did not move at all. I looked at the name tag on my chest. The letters seemed darker now beneath the candlelight, no longer a joke, no longer a wound hidden under etiquette. They were a signature. Vanessa raised her glass higher. But tonight, she said, we choose joy. We choose the future. We choose the people who lift this family up instead of weighing it down with old disappointments. The applause began before she lowered the microphone. It came from people who did not know what they had just clapped for. That was the moment something inside me became completely calm. Not numb. Not broken. Calm. I placed my napkin on the table, aligned the edges with care, and stood. The widower beside me looked up, startled. Across the room, Mark finally saw me. His mouth opened slightly, as if he wanted to say my name, but had forgotten how. Vanessa was still smiling when I began walking toward the front of the ballroom. Step by step, past table 18, past the gift table, past the framed seating chart that had placed me near the kitchen and called others close family. The room grew quieter as people noticed me. By the time I reached the microphone, Vanessa's smile had thinned into something careful. I held out my hand. For a second, she did not give it to me. Then Madison, softly, said, "Grandma," and that one word opened a door Vanessa could not close. I took the microphone from Vanessa's hand, and for the first time all evening, she had nothing polished to say. The room was quiet enough that I could hear the soft clink of someone setting down a glass. I looked at Madison first, because whatever had been done around her, this was still her wedding day, and I would not turn my pain into a stain she could never wash from her memory. "You look beautiful, sweetheart," I said. "Your grandfather would have cried the moment he saw you walk down that aisle." Madison pressed one hand to her mouth, and her eyes filled immediately. I let that truth sit there for a breath. Then I turned slightly, not toward Vanessa, not toward Mark, but toward the room. My husband Henry believed that family was not proven by photographs, seating charts, or speeches. He believed it was proven in the quiet places, when no one was watching, when someone needed help and another person gave it without asking to be praised. My voice sounded steadier than I felt, but only I knew that. To everyone else, I must have looked like an old woman giving a gentle wedding blessing. That was useful. Henry left something for this family, I continued. Not just money, not just documents in an office drawer. He left instructions. Because he knew love without boundaries can become something people use instead of something they honor. Mark's face changed then. He knew enough about his father to understand I was not speaking casually. Vanessa's fingers tightened around the stem of her glass. I reached into my purse and removed the folded copy Clara had given me in the hallway. The paper made a small sound as I opened it. I did not read every legal word. I did not need to. I read only the part that mattered. Any family member or beneficiary who knowingly humiliates, isolates, pressures, or attempts to benefit from Eleanor Whitmore through public embarrassment, misrepresentation, or financial manipulation may have related support from the Whitmore Family Trust, suspended pending review. The silence that followed was not polite. It was complete. Even the servers near the wall seemed to stop moving. I folded the paper once, carefully. This evening, I was given a name tag that did not call me. Grandmother. I was seated away from my family. I was removed from the photographs. I listened while people praised a celebration partly funded by money I gave quietly, because I believed I was helping my granddaughter. I looked at Madison then, and I saw confusion turn slowly into hurt. Not at me, at the people sitting closest to her. I did not give that money for recognition, I said. I gave it because I love you. But love does not require me to stand in a room and pretend disrespect is a joke. Vanessa stepped forward with a tight smile. Eleanor, this is not the time. I looked at her, and my voice stayed soft. You made it the time when you printed the card. A small sound moved through the guests, not laughter now, but understanding. Mark stood halfway from his chair. Mom, he said. Just that. One word, too late. I turned to him. I waited for you to correct it. I waited all evening. He sat back down, as if the sentence had taken the strength from his knees. I faced Madison once more. Your grandfather wanted this family protected from greed, but he also wanted it protected from cowardice. Tonight, I finally understand why. For several seconds, no one moved. Vanessa still stood beside me with her glass in her hand, but the confidence had drained from her face so completely that even her smile seemed unsure where to rest. I did not raise my voice. I did not point at her. I did not need to. Some truths do not need decoration. They only need to be placed in the center of a room and allowed to breathe. Madison pushed back her chair and stood slowly, her white gown whispering against the floor. Grandma, she said again, but this time the words sounded different. Smaller. Wounded. I looked at her and saw the little girl from my backyard, the child who once asked Henry if stars were holes poked in heaven so love could shine through. I wanted to cross the room and hold her. I wanted to tell her none of this was her fault. But I also knew that comfort offered too quickly can become another way of hiding the truth. So I only said, I hope one day you understand the difference between being forgotten and choosing to walk away. Then I removed the name tag from my dress. The pin tugged lightly at the fabric, leaving 2 tiny holes near Henry's brooch. I looked at the card one last time, at those carefully printed words that were meant to shrink me in front of strangers. They looked foolish now, smaller than paper. I walked to the gift table and placed it beside the cream envelope with Madison's name on it. Vanessa made a sharp little movement toward me. Eleanor, she said, this has gone far enough. I turned back to her. No, Vanessa. It went far enough when you mistook my silence for permission. Mark stepped away from the head table, his face pale, his hands open as if he wanted to catch something already fallen. Mom, please, can we talk? I looked at my son, and for the first time that night, I allowed myself to feel the full weight of his failure. Not as a boy, not as the child I had raised. As a grown man who had watched his mother be humiliated and waited until consequences arrived to find his voice. We can talk another day, I said. Tonight, you should sit with what you allowed. Clara was waiting near the ballroom doors. She did not ask whether I was all right. Good friends know when that question is too heavy to answer in public. She simply opened the door, and we walked out together into the cool Charleston night. The harbor breeze moved gently against my face, and for the first time in hours, I could breathe without feeling watched. Behind us, the ballroom remained bright and full of flowers. Ahead of me, the marble steps led down to the valet stand, where strangers were kinder to me than my own family had been. The next morning, Mr. Aldridge received Clara's photographs, my screenshots, the recording, and a copy of the card. By noon, the review of the Whitmore Family Trust had begun. By Friday, the funds Vanessa had expected to help with Madison's new house were frozen. Mark called 8 times. I answered none of them. Madison came 3 days later, alone, wearing jeans and an old College of Charleston sweatshirt, her eyes swollen from crying. She did not ask about money. She did not defend her mother. She stood on my porch holding the cream envelope I had left at the wedding and whispered, "I did not know, Grandma." I studied her face for a long moment. Then I opened the door wider. "We can start with the truth," I said. And for the first time in a very long while, someone from my family stepped into my home without pretending I was invisible.